Right, let's have a look at what's making the international newspaper front pages now. Joining me to do that is the social commentator Dorcas Gwata. Morning to you, Dorcas.
Morning.
Let's start first with the Bangkok Post. On the front page here, of course, the aftermath of the bomb in Bangkok. The Prime Minister there is playing down the Uyghur theory. So Chinese Uyghur Muslims there essentially are being ruled out in terms of who is at fault for the blast. And they've also declined British government assistance. The Thai government have. So, I mean, what's the latest on the situation?
I think in their confusion of trying to gather themselves on what is going on here, they're probably rejecting the help that they need. Doesn't mean that you're actually allowing the British to take over the whole scene, but there's a lot of value in allowing international cooperation. Terrorism is an international, it's a global entity, so any help that they need, they should. This is unusual, though, that nobody has claimed you know, for this bomb, which is, it hasn't got anybody's signature per se. It doesn't have IS signature. We know that Thailand has been in conflict, not least internally. So very, very unusual circumstances. But I think they ought to pull in as much help as they can. Bangkok is a hub for travel. It's very easy to get away. It's a very high populated city. So the tensions there, I can imagine, are very, very high at the moment.
Absolutely. Let's move on now to the Independent of the UK. The main picture story and story on the front page is the plot against Chilcot. So this is Sir John Chilcot, who is chairing the Iraq inquiry, essentially finding out this is the aftermath of the Iraq War when the government went to war with Iraq. And it's very much looking into who's at fault, who's to blame, the compensation potentially involved. And it's a very contentious subject because families of people who did go to war in that country are now trying to sue to get answers from this report. It's taking so long. What is the latest on this? Because Whitehall and Number 10, he's saying, are using smears to discredit the report.
Gavin, it's been a while. I mean, you would think by now would have, you know, several inquiries and everything would have been brushed through, not least for those who are grieving. But I also think as a country, we are the country of inquiries. There's something about us constantly having an inquiry to inquire. Somebody said we need an inquiry into why we need inquiries. So the process itself allows whoever has been investigated the freedom to say, well, actually, I can't comment. And even then, when the results come in, so the process itself is very problematic. But David Cameron is putting a knife edge in here because he wasn't in power. It was a Labour government that was in power. So how are they going to come out of this? Can they survive it? They're very weak on the ground at the moment. So I agree with him entirely. We ought to move on.
One of the key facets of this is that Mr. Chilcot wants the people who are to be questioned or some of the subjects within the report to have a right of reply if they're given an allegation or that something's put to them, which takes time. They can, I don't know how long the time frame is exactly, but everybody needs a right of reply, and that's part of the process that's holding this up.
And one of those people may well be Tony Blair, who is moved on significantly, but in my view needs to come in and answer. He has questions to answer here. I think he needs to come in.
I think he has answered some before, but I'm sure that there are more to come from this report because there's so many knock-on effects from further questioning of various people.
The impact of this war, Gavin, is actually what we're talking about. It's a huge impact.
Exactly. Let's move on to this day now of Nigeria. On the front page here, senators concerned as Buhari may have overlooked confirmation for AMCON, so he's saying that he's going to correct the error there. But what I think is really interesting, and it's constantly on the front pages of this day and other newspapers across Africa, the military there obliterates fleeing Boko Haram terrorists. So what is the latest story on the front page of this one?
Well, I thought two stories were equally combined. In one way, he's making a lot of progress, so much progress that critics must be looking at for him for some faults from him. There must be something that must be some error in his process. He's a military man, so one would expect him to not need much advice on military fronts. So if he's overlooked anything on the military end, I think he needs to look into that. But yes, we're making progress with Boko Haram there. We've got them running. This terrorist region wreaked riot around the region. So yes, there are some progresses, but the impact, and I speak here as a public health specialist, the impact, Gavin, of war and the cost of war and the trauma of war is something that we forget to measure. We measure deaths very well, but actually not the impact. Women and children who have been impacted by this catastrophe.
Very much true. Let's move on to the USA Today now before we finish. On the front page here, we've got the little pink pill gets FDA approval. This is the first libido drug for women. Don't just call it Viagra, they're saying. That's a very interesting story, which I'm sure will generate the waves as it sort of gets put onto the market. But Donald Trump, again, continuing to make headlines. His ideas are not so radical there, according to the newspaper.
You know, I really enjoy American run-up presidency. I think it's very dramatic. It reveals America. You will remember a gentleman called George Bush.
Oh, yeah.
He came in with a weak rhetoric, but somebody out there was listening, and somebody else liked it. So these ideas that might sound absurd to us, such as Trump saying, I will deport all illegal immigrants from America. Now, when the Hispanic voters are hearing that, he's losing those voters. So it's going to take a very good Democrat, if there is one, to kind of sort of punch into that. But he's running his mouth. But in the history of America, people who do run their mouths do get votes. So very interesting times. Either way, he's not going away quietly. Even with an outcome, I think Trump will have a position in American politics.
Dorcas Gwata, thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated as always. You're watching This Day Live.